This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Ghannam.
And I'm Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, there's been an assassination attempt on presumptive Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump. He was shot at a rally in Pennsylvania. It grazed his ear, and he has been taken to a hospital and is recovering well. It has sent shockwaves through the American electorate, including the Democratic Party. We'll be covering that on the show today, later. In addition to that, the Israeli military launched a massive, devastating massacre in Gaza within the last 24 hours in Gaza City, attempting to kill a Hamas commander, Mohammed Deif. There is no confirmation that Mohammed Deif has been killed, but close to 100 Palestinian civilians, men, women, and children, were killed. The situation in Gaza remains grave. The United Nations says that over 500,000 Palestinians are facing severe level 5 starvation, and there's no end in sight. We're going to be covering all of this today on Arab Talk, including the fact that Elon Musk has endorsed Trump after saying that he wasn't going to endorse anybody, Jamal. And we're gonna have a discussion about how will Benjamin Netanyahu, charged with genocide with warrants out for his arrest, is going to be welcomed by the U.S. Congress. But before we get to that, we're going to hear an interview that you did with sociologist and author David Miller discussing Facebook and Meta's recent policy change that will remove posts that are critical of Zionism. Miller recently prevailed in an employment claim against the University of Bristol for termination partly as a result of his criticism of Zionism. It's a really great interview, Jamal.
That's right, Jess. And of course, he's an expert on Islamophobia, an expert because of his own experience dealing with attacks and calls for his termination. And the University of Bristol said that, basically agreed with him. Zionism is an ideology, and you can criticize an ideology. But now we have Facebook, and I'm sure also some states might codify criticism of Zionism as anti-Semitism. And that's the fear, basically shredding the Constitution and shredding your right for free speech. And he made a very strong point, and in my opinion, and I think that's also based on what he says, Jess, is this is kind of like the last act that they're putting together, because they've tried everything to silence Palestinians and pro-Palestinians and critics of Israel. So it's kind of like moved, the first conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Now is conflating criticism of Zionism with anti-Semitism. And so if you want to talk about Palestine, for example, you can't talk about the Zionist colonization of Palestine. So really, you cannot talk about anything that happened before 1948 or that is happening now. And that's how they plan to basically silence you. Let's watch David Miller. Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians have made it increasingly viewed as a pariah state. In the United States, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and its surrogates are now bearing down hard to enforce policies to censor all criticism and dissent against any of Israel's actions, including genocide and apartheid against indigenous Palestinians. At the nexus of these efforts is codifying the very criticism of Zionism and, by extent, Israel itself, as tantamount to anti-Semitism, which would make it difficult and even impossible to oppose any of Israel's actions. An example is Facebook's recent policy change that will remove posts critical of Zionism, designating them as hate speech by conflating it with anti-Semitism. Although Facebook has a long history of removing pro-Palestinian posts that expose Israeli state-sponsored violence against Palestinians, designating anti-Zionist posts as hate speech had not been a serious consideration as it was viewed as critical of political ideology. Joining us on Arab Talk this week is David Miller. He's a British sociologist and author whose research and publications focus on Islamophobia, racism, and propaganda. He's also the co-founder of the nonprofit Public Interest Investigations. Miller recently prevailed in an employment claim against the University of Bristol for unfair termination, partly as a result of his criticism of Zionism. The ruling established that anti-Zionist views are politically protected speech. Welcome back again to Arab Talk, David.
Thank you very much.
When you last came on Arab Talk, attacks on those critical of Israel and Zionism on campuses and otherwise was already virulent. How much higher have the stakes become for Israel to censor criticism of Zionism and pro-Palestinian support since October 7 and the massive global protest against its genocide in Gaza?
Well, I mean, as everyone can see, the stakes have become much, much higher. The Zionist regime is engaged in an ongoing, day-by-day series of massacres, which, of course, are genocide against the Palestinians, an attempt to wipe out the entire Palestinian people, or indeed to force the remnants of them out into the Sinai. That's clear. It's also clear, as you say, that there's been mass demonstrations all over the world, that they are have lost, irredeemably lost the battle of public opinion. It's important to say that they are also losing in Gaza against the combined might of the 7 or 8 different resistance factions. It's not just Hamas, as people mistakenly say. And of course, they're losing in the north. They threat to invade Lebanon, but they can't. They know that they would lose. So these are important. These last 2 points are important details because they relate to the global loss of public opinion in favor of the Jewish state, in that they must try to limit the damage of the loss of public opinion and loss in the propaganda war first of all, by continuing to lie and to make up excuses and lies in order to justify genocide. Of course, we saw that immediately on October the 7th, the stories about rapes and beheadings and mass killing, all which are now known to be entirely untrue. But they have to also target the pro-Palestine movement, and it's important for them to do that for several reasons. One is that the pro-Palestine movement all around the world can be seen from Gaza. People see. They know that we are with them. And that is really extremely important for morale. But secondly, they have to try and destroy the possibility of pro-Palestinian activism. And so they do that in a huge variety of ways. Yes, they attack student encampments. They send ex-IDF or Zionist thugs in to attack the encampments. Yes, they are planning a whole series of laws in the US and indeed elsewhere, including in the UK, to outlaw anti-Zionism, essentially, to make anti-Zionism illegal, to make it be classed in the law as a form of racism, which of course, as everybody knows, and indeed my case shows, it's not. And so that they have to do a whole variety of tactics. We haven't got time to survey the whole range of tactics which they use against what you mentioned, AIPAC. Of course, that's an important element, but there are many more important elements to the Zionist campaign to silence the pro-Palestinian movement. And the conclusion to what I've just been saying is that they're losing that battle, and that's why they become more and desperate, why they have more and more in the US and the UK. Why, of course, we say that Zionism mustn't be defeated in Palestine. It has to be defeated everywhere that it rears its ugly head, and of course that includes especially the US and the UK.
Do you think the ruling in your case helped bolster the discourse critical of Israel, its ongoing genocide in Gaza and other human rights violations, or have new challenges arisen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when I first heard the judgment on the 5th of February, I mean, it was obviously a massive victory for me, and it cleared my name, but I didn't really appreciate how that would then work through the system. And of course, how it's worked through the system, it's not just that people, every employer in the UK is now is now effectively banned from sacking people for being anti-Zionist. So that's itself a remarkable victory. But it's also that in people's minds, they've suddenly come to the conclusion that their anti-Zionism is something which they can express. And I've had countless people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, say to me that they have been able to say things and find a voice which they were unable to have before because of the intimidation that there was on anti-Zionist views. And of course, more importantly, even than that, is the fact that for the last 50 years, Zionists have been trying to make it seem like anti-Zionism was, to quote the foreign minister of the entity in 1972, that the anti-Zionism was the new anti-Semitism. And of course, they tried to do that for a long, long time. 50 years, they've managed to codify that view in the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition, which of course is written by Zionist organizations working directly with the Mossad. So, of course, the victory in my case drives an absolute coach and horses through that, where it's declared that anti-Zionist views are, in the language of the Equality Act, worthy of respect in a democratic society, and they are therefore not racist. And that, to have that legal judgment is extremely important for the movement, I think, in my country, in the UK, but also elsewhere, because people start to see, well, actually, of course, anti-Zionist views should be protected. Of course, they're anti-racist. And there needs to be a recognition of that. And that, of course, is what the whole of the Zionist movement is determined to act against and to try and smash.
There is a pervasive campaign to throttle and police speech that is pro-Palestine and critical of Israel on social media platforms. Facebook has now revised its community standards to give Zionism the same protections from hate speech as an ethnic group. Its policy is very cryptic about what differentiates criticism of Zionism as legitimate political dissent and hate speech against Jews as a group. This is the most explicit censoring, but there are multiple words and expressions that people have to work around to post about Palestine, the genocide. Talk about the more insidious infiltration of speech on social media in order to delegitimize the Palestinian narrative.
So, I mean, in the case of Facebook, it's instructive. I mean, Facebook is, let's remember, a corporation which has been pro-Israel for a very long time. If you look at the senior board of Facebook, there are 23 people there, of whom at least 7 are Jewish. And how many of those Jewish people are anti-Zionist? Well, the answer to that is obvious when you ask the question. It's zero. Because you don't get to that level of a company like Meta or Facebook without being Zionist. Zuckerberg's in charge, he's a Zionist. And of course, the one I would locate and talk about is Nicola Mendelsohn, who's of course from the UK, who's head of the global business group of Meta. And she, of course, has been collaborating with the witch hunt against the left in the UK for some years. Her husband is a member of the House of Lords in the UK, a former head of Labour Friends of Israel, a large pro-Israel donor to the Labour Party in this country. So you can see the way in which the kind of the overrepresentation of Jews at the highest level in society, which of course is the case in economically speaking in the US and in the UK, has an impact on the way in which questions of Palestine are dealt with. Because of course the people who are at the top in the corporations, in the social media corporations, for example, who are Jewish, are Zionists. And that means, of course, that Zionists have an outsized influence on the way in which the social media operate. And it's not just, of course, Meta, it's also the other social media companies. Famously, since Elon Musk took over, there's been a sort of apparent pushback against the Zionist attempt to censor. But Musk, of course, is famous for his apparent defense of free speech. And then, of course, we also have seen, haven't we, his trip to meet Netanyahu and to go to the kibbutz Be'eri, where the IDF assassinated so many Jewish settlers. And of course, his relationships with the ADL, his fight with the ADL over advertising. So we know that even in the most conditional case, which is Twitter or X, that there's still been a concerted pushback, and the Zionists are able to find ways in which to curtail pro-Palestinian talk and discussion. So that's of course a sort of feature of the social media world. It's a feature of the mass media world too. When you look at across the main media corporations, there are either large numbers of paid up ideological Zionists at the top, or meaning Jewish Zionists, or there are non-Jews who are effectively ideological supporters. Like, let's think, of course, Axel Springer in Germany, one of the biggest media corporations in Germany, where they fly Israeli flags outside the headquarters building, and staff are told not to come to work again ever if they can't cope with that. Or Rupert Murdoch, who of course owns many interests in the US and also in the UK and elsewhere, who is of course a staunch Zionist, very staunch Zionist. So that's the case with the mainstream media, social media, and we fight against that. But we fight against that with the knowledge that we have the whole world behind us, because of course the whole world sees what's happening, and part of the reason for that, of course, is social media, and that's the conundrum of social media. While the Zionists have a grip at the top in terms of policies, and the reason they're having to bring in this policy is because the hatred of Zionism has reached record heights as a result of the incessant parade of dead children on social media. And so when you see, there's a great analysis on the TikTok website where TikTok are protecting themselves against the allegations that they're a Chinese Communist Party front, allegations which are plainly preposterous. And they say, well, it's not just us, it's not just on TikTok that pro-Palestine content outnumbers pro-Israel content. It's on every social media platform. And it's true. That the reason is that the world supports the Palestinians, but the social media companies don't, and that's why they're trying to clamp down on that and try and make it less easy for us to share the horror that is being inflicted in Gaza.
The Guardian published leaked Meta content moderators' training materials, which showed a slide deck on, and quoting, credible violence abuse standards, listing Zionists among global and local vulnerable group. Such special treatment of a political ideology undermines people's right to freedom of expression and stifles critical public debate online. Are you aware of other groups granted similar protection by Meta and others based on ideological reasons?
Well, no, of course not. I mean, in general, Western states tend to be very protective of their national symbols. The US and its flag, the UK and its flag, the Union Jack, which of course leftists refer to as the butcher's apron. Of course they're protected, but there is no other ideology which is protected in the way in which Zionism is. Zionism is a form of racism. I'm fond of quoting the University of Bristol's judgment on racism on its own website, which remains there on its website, which I quoted in the tribunal when I took them to court and won against them. And on their website, they have a statement on Black Lives Matter and on racism, and it talks about the need for all of us to work together to eradicate racism. And that of course, is the standard anti-racist position. So it's not, the problem is not just that Zionism is becoming protected and they're trying to make it a protected characteristic, but that actually the correct position of Zionism is it's a form of racism and it needs to be eradicated. So we have quite a distance to travel before we have an official recognition of that. But let's remember that racism was not recognized in Western societies, in the UK and the US, until after a long and prolonged struggle by the civil movements, the various elements of the civil rights movement. So we have a struggle and a distance to go, but it's clear that the genocide has dramatically boosted the global consciousness. Zionism is a form of racism. Zionism is genocide, and it needs to be abolished.
The last time you were on, we discussed the traction that the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism was getting in conflating criticism of Zionism or Israel with anti-Semitism. Do you think Israel's damaged world image is driving pressure to adopt this more uniformly?
Well, I think, first of all, it's driving to abolish the IHRA and to reject it. But of course, amongst the elites, amongst people who run the UK and the US, who are heavily influenced by often infiltrated and penetrated by Zionists. Well, of course, they want to extend the IHRA in the case of the UK. In the last 6 months, 9 months since Al-Aqsa Flood was launched on October the 7th, we've had government ministers, including the Home Secretary, the Secretary for Levelling Up, are arguing that all government bodies need to adopt the IHRA, and that they are pressuring all government bodies, and indeed all universities and all other similar public bodies to adopt the IHRA. The government has already adopted it. Every government department uses it. It's used by the police in categorizing and recording hate crimes. So they record hate crimes against the Jews as including people saying "Free Palestine," or "From the river to the sea," or carrying effigies of dead babies on demonstrations is regarded as anti-Jewish hate by the police. So of course we have an apparent epidemic of anti-Semitism in the UK after Al-Aqsa Flood, which of course is entirely made up out of the definition of anti-Semitism, which is being operationalized by the police under pressure from the government, and indeed from the government's from the Zionist movement's allies in the government, including the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman and the Secretary for Levelling Up Michael Gove. So there's a huge pressure from the Zionists and their allies in the government on the police to arrest people for nothing, essentially for saying "Free Palestine," or a whole range of other things, including comparisons of the Zionist genocide to the Nazi genocide. That's apparently anti-Jewish hate. It's plainly nothing of the kind. And the question should be, how accurate is the comparison? And there are things to be said for and against that, of course. But of course, what's happening is that the Zionists are piling the pressure on. The police are clearly acceding to some extent to that pressure, although they have in some respects resisted that. And as a result, you're seeing thousands of people arrested for essentially non-crimes, which are categorized and listed as being anti-Jewish crimes.
So there is a palpable wave of McCarthyism sweeping the United States and other countries. It seems that not a day goes by that someone hasn't been dismissed from academia, fired from a media job, or canceled for calling for an end to Israel's carnage or criticizing its policies. With its going genocide in Gaza, Israel lost its public relations edge, and now its only path to survival is full-scale repression. Has panic set in?
Oh yes, panic has set in. I mean, look, I haven't said this explicitly enough so far, this interview, but look, the Zionist entity is on the verge of collapse. It cannot function economically. The port of Eilat in the south has been closed down. It's being declared bankrupt because of the Ansarallah enforced no-go zone in the Red Sea from Yemen. From the north, Hezbollah has effectively evicted some 60 to 80,000 settlers who are now being put up at government expense in hotels and other temporary rental accommodations. They know that they cannot go into Lebanon and what they want to do, of course, is to bring the US in on their side. But even if they bring the US in on their side, they're going to lose. The Hezbollah have something like 150 to 200,000 missiles. It's said by the Zionists that they have fired 5,000 since October the 7th. So they have a huge amount of missiles which can reach every part of the occupied territory of Palestine. And if that blows up, if they go into Lebanon, then Hezbollah will take them on, the Iraqi resistance will take them on, Syrians will take them on, and indeed the Iranians will come in as well. So they will be destroyed. And that is their panic. They know that they are on the verge of destruction. They know that they are on the verge of collapse. So the colony may be liquidated in the sense that the system will be removed and there will have to be a Palestinian state. And if Jews want to live there in the future, they're going to have to find a way to live with the Palestinians as Palestinian citizens. Otherwise, they will have to leave.
What's the effect of this censoring, going back to Facebook and other social media outlets, on Palestinians, particularly living in Gaza? Like, for example, recently, Microsoft has basically banned Palestinians using Skype in Gaza, which is one of the very few sources of communication. And if we were talking about now Facebook censoring many Palestinian sites, including basically banning them. What kind of impact this will have on what Israel is doing to Palestinians in Gaza and the genocide?
Well, it kind of looks like obviously there's the morale question, but and we see on social media the appeals from Gaza for the world to pay attention, for the world to help, and the despair that there is in many Palestinians. But we also see, don't we, the large numbers of videos of the Qassam brigades or the Al-Quds brigades or the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades or the military wings of the DFLP or the PFLP engaging in huge numbers of armed operations with the result of which result in the death and destruction of large numbers of IDF soldiers, which the Israelis are minimizing the number of casualties which they admit. They have been defeated militarily by the resistance in Gaza, and that's the problem for them. And that, as a result, the morale of Palestinians is not just something which is very low. It's that actually there are senses in which the morale of Palestinians is high. They are fighting for their lives, and we see that the Western media and the Western social media companies are trying their best to not allow this information to travel. But of course, we have other ways of communicating now. Not just Skype, not just Twitter. There are all sorts of other ways of communicating, and people are seeing what's happening in Gaza. I think this is the first time in human history we've seen a live enactment of a genocide, and of course, this genocide would get to be much worse than anything that people now living have seen themselves in the past. So, yes, of course, it's an attempt to damage Palestinian morale. Yes, of course, it's an attempt to help the Israelis to select targets. I mean, the use of WhatsApp, for example, it's clear that there are connections between to which ordered WhatsApp and the Israelis, where it looks like it may be being used for targeting of Palestinians, such that when they use WhatsApp, that the targeting data given to the Israelis may be the contacts which WhatsApp users have on their phones. So there's all sorts of ways in which that it's not just a question of what information is getting out, but also the direct collaboration of these companies with the genocide.
Has public opinion shifted in the UK vis-a-vis what Israel is doing since the genocide? I mean, we've seen thousands of people marching in support of Palestine, but did this actually shift the pendulum politically? Now you have a new government, for example.
Sure, I think it has. I mean, obviously the electoral system in this country is amongst the least proportional of all systems. It's not proportional in its first part. The whole system is designed to make it impossible for independent candidates to be elected. Now, so that makes it very, very difficult. But in the last election, we did get 5 independent candidates elected. We got an additional 3 Green MPs whose policies on Palestine are not great, but they appear to be progressive to most people. So that's a sea change. And we always won another 5 independent candidates as well, by very small margins. And that sea change is not going to go back in the box. The government that's currently come in is possibly even more pro-Israel than the previous government because of the history where they got rid of Jeremy Corbyn, the previous leader, for his alleged anti-Semitism and entirely concocted nonsense. And as a result, the Zionists have a total grip on the Labour Party in terms of donors, in terms of staffing, in terms of MPs, in terms of membership of Labour Friends of Israel, or the Jewish Labour Movement, which is the Zionist faction within the Labour Party. So that's true. The Labour Party is becoming increasingly in the grip of the Zionists, but popular opinion is all the other way. And as a result, we are able to start to talk openly about Zionism for the first time. Previously, the anti-war movement, the Palestine Solidarity movement, was very, very cagey about, very reluctant to use the Z word, the Zionism word. And indeed, the Palestine Solidarity campaign in the UK removed Zionism as a word from its constitution. But now, of course, people see that they've come to the conclusion, many people have come to the conclusion that didn't previously have this view, including people on the left, that the only solution is the dissolution of the Jewish state, the ending of the Jewish state, and the creation of a unitary Palestinian state. And that view has become much more popular now than it was then. And we start to see people talking about and understanding what Zionism is, understanding its racism in Palestine, and understanding also that the Zionist movement is heavily organized and heavily penetrated into societies like the UK, the US, Germany, and France. And then that, as a result, we don't just need to defeat the Zionists in Palestine. We need to defeat it here in the UK, there in the US, and everywhere else that it rears its ugly head.
David Miller, thank you again for coming on Arab Talk.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's the voice and the face of sociologist and author David Miller discussing Facebook and Meta's recent policy change that will monitor and remove posts critical of Zionism. It's a very compelling argument. It's a very disturbing story, Jamal. I think the point that this is coming out because, Hezbollah Israeli propagandists are really freaking out because of the international solidarity of millions, if not billions, of people in the world who are condemning Israel for their genocide and massacres in Gaza. And because of this criticism and the criticism of settler colonialism that Israel practices and the criticism of Zionism, which is propelling this genocide, are freaking them out. People are waking up to this. So I kind of agree with David Miller. This is their last stand. And but it seems like Meta and Facebook are complicit in this attack on the First Amendment, Jamal.
Well, this is not the first time. I mean, we've talked about this. They've been shutting down pro-Palestinian sites. They've been basically, penalizing people who post something that is pro-Palestinian. But now the story comes out because of a leak, a memo that they've been sending, an internal memo that was first published in The Guardian about making this a policy. And we know now Meta, along with Microsoft and Apple and whatever, they are the leaders in AI.
And Google.
And NVIDIA. And therefore, now they can weaponize AI to basically do a quick search, and I'm no expert in AI, but I assume crawl through your words, through your videos, through your printed material, spoken material, and anytime you hear the word Zionist, Zionism, Zionist, whatever, you're gonna be banned. You're gonna be banned, And if you get banned from Meta or Facebook, which means WhatsApp, they own WhatsApp, they also own Instagram, and then you have now Twitter, which might follow suit, hopefully not, and TikTok. But that's where most, I would assume, anyone under the age of 40 gets their news. Maybe there are some still old-fashioned people who like to watch CNN on TV and so forth. But the majority of the population, in other words, they will not hear what's going on in Palestine. They will not hear other perspectives in this matter. Just give you a recent example. Because I mentioned Microsoft rang a bell. They canceled Skype on Palestinians in Gaza. That was their only way to communicate to the outside world. I mean, this is heartless. I mean, it's really cold and heartless when they lost cellular service, they don't have electricity, and the few minutes that they have sometimes, when somebody has access to a Wi-Fi or something like this or satellite, they use Skype to communicate with their families outside. And they just basically canceled it, and they said they're doing this supposedly, maybe because Hamas uses it. You got 2.5 million people living in Gaza. You have less than now 15, 20,000 Hamas operatives working there. I mean, operating in Gaza.
But Jamal, as David Miller pointed out, and as you and I have been pointing out, the apartheid state, the Israeli government and military, are not only losing the war, but they're losing the Hezbollah war. And they know this. And like changes in the definition of anti-Semitism, which they're trying to legislate all over the world, in Germany, here in the United States, and now getting social media to get on the bandwagon to ban, suppress, edit, monitor people who are critical of the apartheid state. Of course, it's only happening because this global solidarity movement is so powerful, because they've got nothing else. They don't have world opinion on their side. They're committing these atrocities on a daily basis. The ICC and the ICJ are coming after them, and they have nothing left in their quiver, as we say, in terms of confronting the fact that they're losing on all fronts. They're losing militarily, and they're losing in public opinion, and they're losing in the international realm of the criminal court. So are we surprised that they're trying to do this? I dare say not, but they're going to lose this battle. I'm pretty good at predictions. You know that, Jamal.
Yeah,
David
Miller takes it a step further, and he says, actually, these are the final days of Zionism, and that's why there is a panic. They're panic-stricken, so they're trying everything through AIPAC and their surrogates to try anything that sticks. Just
they're
going
to lose.
I mean, they're short of really going to every individual with some tape, masking tape or whatever, sticking it on people's mouths to basically silence them. I mean, this is how desperate they are.
Maybe that should be our next Arab Talk logo, Jamal. You and I with masking tape over our mouths. But in fact, it's never worked with you and I. We've always continued to voice on Arab Talk our unvarnished opinions, and we'll continue to do so. We're not going to be kowtowed about this, even though our own social media accounts, as we've described before, in fact, have been attacked, by Meta, by Facebook, by IG. We've all had our accounts temporarily suspended or suspended forever or throttled, exactly. So we're going to continue to confront it. I believe, like David Miller, I believe this is a good sign, because it means that Israel is losing, and that's the point here.
So our major story, which we weren't expecting to be reporting on, and by the time we air this program, many people would have heard that there was an attempt on the life of former President Trump. And just basically, Trump was speaking in a rally in Pennsylvania. I think it's in Butler, Pennsylvania, and on Saturday evening. And a gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks, who has been named now, 20-year-old, opened fire from the rooftop of a building outside the security perimeters. I was actually surprised. How the hell did he get in? I mean, if Secret Service, this is a former president. This is also a presidential candidate that he got this close. And apparently he was using an AR-15.
No, AR-15, which is a semi-automatic weapon. And he was far enough away, Jamal. This gets to another discussion, right, about the use of these military-style weapons. But an AR-15 is a military-style weapon. It is a semi-automatic. He was on a rooftop, quote, outside the security perimeter. The bullet did pierce the ear of President Trump. And as he was being whisked off the stage, there's the iconic image, which we know Republicans are going to be using, raising his fist and basically saying, fight. So this is a big development.
It is a very big development. You're talking about less than 1 inch, and former President Trump would have been hit in the head. I mean, this basically grazed or went through his ear, and unfortunately, one of the attendees was killed, and 2 others were critically injured.
And listen, an AR-15, the ammunition that's used in an AR-15 is absolutely deadly. And from what I could gather, it looks like there were 3 shots, a little break, and then 5 shots, all happening within just a few seconds. And that's terrifying, to be honest. I mean, we're talking about semi-automatic weaponry where 8 bullets of a military-grade, killing machine were able to be discharged within a couple of seconds, Jamal. It's pretty terrifying. And, we say that euphemistically, Trump dodged a bullet, right? We say that frequently as a euphemism, but literally and in reality, he dodged a bullet, because you're quite correct. Half an inch even, just off a little bit, and he would have been hit more severely. So it's really a big development in the political landscape, and I think we need to take a few minutes here to kind of review it. I mean, one big question, even though I've already predicted that Donald Trump will be our next president, I think this particular event and the polling, they've already polled on this, Jamal, if you could believe it. That shows you where we are in the United States, that this assassination attempt on Trump has just increased his chances of becoming the next president, 47, of the United States. So people are rallying around him. This is a big deal.
Listen, I was going to talk about, you and I were going to talk about, and which we are going to talk about, Biden's continuous chain of blunders or misspoken words, whatever. I don't want to use the clinical description.
I will later.
And the latest of which at NATO, when he introduced Zelensky as Putin, when he spoke at
President
NATO.
Putin, right.
Yes. I present to you the president of the Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin. I mean, you should see the look at Zelensky's face. And then, of course, in another thing I watched him talking about in a Q&A, they've asked him does he consult with. And this was underreported, this part. And he was naming his title, well, I consult with my commander-in-chief and my secretary of defense. Well, you're the commander-in-chief, right? And my secretary of defense, and so on, so on, so on. It's just seems like every day he just shows that he is unfit to lead. And it's sad, because it's I feel like someone is prolonging the torture of my grandfather. I mean, my grandfather has been dead for a long time, but reaching an age that you have to kind of tell him, Pops, just sit at home, watch TV, and relax. And then they put him, in front of these cameras and world leaders to embarrass himself and embarrass the United States.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things to say about this, Jamal. And his inner circle and his handlers are doing the world and the United States and the electorate a disservice. Because after this disastrous NATO press conference, you could see all of the pressers and all of the Biden supporters saying, oh, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. It was terrible. And this goes with what I was saying before, Jamal. This is not just regular cognitive decline in an older adult. This is beyond, above and beyond. To say that, oh, I didn't get a good night's sleep, oh, I have to slow down, oh, I have to pace myself, is really complete rubbish. What we're seeing in this 80-plus-year-old President Biden, is evidence of above and beyond cognitive problems, really cognitive problems. I mean, this is more than just everyday aging. And I think that's the big issue on the table right now. And the more he speaks and the more he puts himself out there, the more we're going to see of it. And yesterday, within the last 24 hours, Bernie Sanders, who's also, in his 80s, came out and put an op-ed in the New York Times saying, hey, Democrats, stop your fighting. President Biden should be running for president. So I think we're headed, Jamal, together with the assassination attempt, Biden's failing popularity, his failing cognitive abilities. I don't know if the elections are over, because anything can happen between now and November, but it's not looking good for President Biden.
So, minutes after the assassination attempt on Trump, Tesla CEO Elon Musk said that he fully endorses Trump. fully endorses him. This is a man who said that he's not going to endorse anyone,
Right.
and just minutes afterwards. I haven't checked recently, but his tweet, now we call it X, or he likes to call it X, had 27 million hits on it and something like 16 million likes or something like this. So this is like Trump just gained millions of dollars of advertisement with this endorsement. I mean, it's just
That's
like
right.
really the CEO, and I don't know if he's still the wealthiest man in the world or second wealthiest man in the world, just really endorsed him, meaning, not just endorsing him by words. Now, basically, this platform is going to be his playground, because
That's right.
the CEO endorsed him. And of course, money is going to start flowing in, which we haven't spoken about because also money has stopped flowing into Biden's presidential campaign. And you've been saying for more than a year that Trump is gonna come back, is gonna make his comeback. And again, I want to remind our listeners and viewers, this is not an endorsement from neither of us.
No.
We don't
No,
support.
it's not.
We don't support Biden. We don't support Trump. Let's make it very clear. And now you are right, but not only you are right, you just got these gifts coming out of nowhere. I mean, gifts to Trump, now that photo that the New York Times took of him bleeding with his fist up in the air, that's a $100 million shot right there. That he can use it. Then you got
That's the
Biden
money shot. That's
saying,
the money shot.
and
yeah.
then you got Biden in the debate saying gibberish. And then you got Biden in NATO just saying crazy stuff. And this happens, and you got the endorsement of one of the most powerful people, we can say, Elon Musk, endorsing him publicly. I don't see even a path of not winning, including that now how to convince what the Democrats hope is another indictment that takes him into prison. Like I think
it's not going to happen.
I think the judges will be scared from indicting him, or not the district attorneys from bringing this any further. And it seems like he has everything just like going his way to win the presidency.
No, I completely agree with you, Jamal. And the Democrats are in disarray. The Democrats are divided. They have their convention coming up. Time is running out. When they look at the top three other Democrats in a head-to-head with Trump, this is before the assassination attempt, they don't win. So I think any way you look at it, given the current dynamics of the situation, Joe Biden, if he remains the nominee, will be a flawed candidate, will continue to be flawed, will continue to lose voters, and will continue to decline cognitively through November. That's going to be reality. If they pick a new person at the new convention, it's going to fragment the Democratic Party, causing more dispossession of Democrats and more people not voting. And so any way you cut it, Jamal, I agree with you. I don't see a path for Biden to get back to a second term. And everything, I mean, even, Trump has done something very brilliant, Jamal, if you've been noticing this. He's remained quiet. with Biden's cognitive decline and problems with his press conferences, which is actually kind of brilliant. I mean, I don't know who's advising him, but for him to just let the Democrats be in a feeding frenzy with one another and, fighting each other is a brilliant political tactic, because the Democrats are going to eat each other and they're going to continue to fragment. And and another thing that came out in the New York Times in this last week, they were interviewing more Arab Americans in terms of the voting. And by the way, that issue that we reported on a couple of months ago about the Never Biden campaign among Arab Americans in Michigan has actually grown, because the other elephant in the room, Jamal, for progressive Democrats is that the Biden red line that he spoke about in Gaza, that red line, You better not invade Rafah, Benjamin Netanyahu. That was the Biden red line. Guess what happened to that red line? Netanyahu not only crossed it, but he's committed multiple massacres and extended the genocide in Gaza. And it looks like Biden's red line, Jamal, is really a green line. It's a green line. It's a go. So
and he said he wasn't going to send him the 500 pound, was it 500
and
pound?
he's sending more.
He sent them already.
Right.
So which brings me to the next topic, which is now Netanyahu will be coming to Washington on July 24th. He'll be addressing a joint session of Congress, and now it says here that he'll also meet with Biden. I mean, who is he going to be meeting with? A declining president of the United States, a president of the United States that he walked all over him. Whatever you said, that red line, which I half-heartedly believe his red line, because we didn't talk about why people won't vote for Biden aside from his gaffes, if they want to call them gaffes, but because of his genocide. His nickname is Genocide Joe. And, no progressive will vote for Genocide Joe, regardless of the fact and regardless of all the fear tactic that the Democrats try to impose on the voters, telling them, you're going to get Trump and he's worse and whatever, but, with all good conscience, they are not going to vote for him. And now we're stuck with Trump. I mean, that's how people feel. He is basically the one coming with the momentum. But what I'm saying is, how will Congress receive Netanyahu?
That's easy, Jamal.
Okay.
And our listeners are not going to like what I'm going to say. But when Netanyahu comes to the joint session of Congress, they will kiss his ring. They will celebrate him. You're going to see hundreds of pictures of American politicians hugging, kissing, bear hugging, shaking hands with a world leader that has been charged with genocide. He's going to be celebrated. He's going to be put on Fox News and every media outlet, and there's going to be hundreds of pictures of him being celebrated in the Congress.
With the exception of few.
Yeah, but it's so small, Jamal. So what?
It's not going to make a difference.
5 people.
What about all these calls to action that I've been seeing on social media?
They're going to happen. There's going to be hundreds of
thousands of people demonstrating. Is that going to sway? Is that going to sway Congress?
No, it won't sway Congress. There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people coming to D.C. to protest Netanyahu. People are talking about some of those protesters getting into Congress, despite whatever security concerns are, in an attempt to disrupt the Netanyahu speech. But any way you package this, Jamal, it's going to look horrific, because we're going to have elected members of the Congress, celebrating a war criminal. And that's what's going to happen. He's going to go meet with a frail and cognitively impaired president who has, and Netanyahu, as you said, has walked all over Biden, has humiliated Biden, and Biden is going to welcome him with open arms. He's going to shake his hand. He's going to give him a bear hug, and there's going to be a photo op.
Last question, and another scenario which we didn't talk about, you alluded to earlier. What if Biden basically resigns and hands the mantle to Kamala Harris? Will she be able to save the day for the Democrats?
She can't. I have bad news for the Democrats. She's a flawed candidate. We can call her Genocide Kamala too. She's been fully supportive of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. She is as disliked, maybe not as much as Hillary Clinton, but almost as disliked by many Americans, especially those on the right. I don't see how Kamala Harris, and again, I'll just refer to the polling. The polling supports the idea that head-to-head, she would also lose against Trump. So Kamala Harris can't rescue the day. Gavin Newsom can't rescue the day. There's not a single Democrat that can rescue the day. But here's the real point, Jamal. Joe Biden isn't going anywhere.
Well, that's what he's saying, unless Jesus tells him to change his mind. That's what he said.
Well, then the only hope that the world has is Jesus. A Palestinian is the only one that can save the world from Donald Trump.
I got to end on this. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.